A routine traffic stop turns into a brutal nightmare when a decorated off-duty black FBI agent is ripped from his car and thrown into a jail cell by corrupt local cops. But they didn't know they just walked into a federal trap. 6 hours later, a precinct falls apart. The oppressive July heat hung over the asphalt of Fairmont City like a wet blanket, but the temperature inside Special Agent Kendrick Hayes's unmarked sedan was ice cold. At 42, Kendrick was a 14-year veteran of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, specifically attached to the Public Corruption Task Force. He had taken down embezzling mayors, crooked judges, and cartel money launderers, but tonight his target was much closer to the street. Kendrick was driving down the dimly lit stretch of Miller Avenue, a notorious corridor in the city's South District. For months, the Bureau had been receiving anonymous tips about the 44th Precinct. Complaints of illegal shakedowns planted evidence, and a terrifying squad of patrolmen who operated like a sanctioned street gang. The local Internal Affairs Division was either completely incompetent or fully complicit, burying every complaint under mountains of bureaucratic red tape. So the Department of Justice had quietly stepped in. Kendrick was entirely off duty on paper, dressed in a faded grey hoodie and plain denim jeans. But operationally, he was exactly where he needed to be. His watch was a high-grade biometric transmitter, and a micro-recorder was securely taped beneath his collarbone, streaming a live audio feed directly to a federal command center a dozen miles away. In his rearview mirror, the inevitable happened. The harsh, blinding strobe of red and blue lights pierced the darkness. A Fairmont City police cruiser rode his bumper its siren, delivering a short, aggressive chirp. Kendrick took a slow, calculated breath. He didn't speed up, and he didn't immediately slam on the brakes. He signaled smoothly and pulled his sedan into the flickering glow of a deserted gas station canopy. He shifted the car into park, rolled down his window, and placed both hands firmly at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. He knew the drill. He knew it better than the men walking up to his car. In the side mirror, Kendrick watched 2 officers approach. The one taking the lead was Officer Mitchell Braddock, a thick-necked, heavily tattooed patrolman with a notorious jacket of excessive force complaints. Flanking him on the passenger side was Officer Cameron Lewis, younger, nervous, his hand already resting entirely too close to the unsnapped holster of his service weapon. "Turn the engine off," Braddock barked as he reached the driver's side window, shining a high-lumen tactical flashlight directly into Kendrick's eyes. "Evening, officer," Kendrick said, his voice a perfectly calibrated baritone of calm. He reached down slowly with one hand, turning the key and killing the engine, then immediately returned his hand to the top of the wheel. "Is there a problem?" "I asked you a question, didn't I?" Braddock snapped, stepping closer, his body language aggressive, entirely ignoring the fact that he hadn't actually asked a question at all. "License, registration, and proof of insurance." "Now, my wallet is in my right back pocket, and the registration is in the glove compartment," Kendrick stated clearly, projecting his voice just enough to ensure the hidden mic picked up every syllable. "I'm going to reach for my wallet first. Is that all right with you, officer? Just get the damn ID and stop talking," Braddock sneered. Kendrick slowly shifted his weight to retrieve his wallet, but as his hand moved out of sight, Braddock's demeanor instantly escalated. "Hey, keep your hands where I can see them," I said. "Keep your hands on the wheel." "You just asked for my ID," Kendrick replied, freezing his movement. "Step out of the vehicle," Braddock yelled, suddenly grabbing the door handle. It was locked. Braddock slammed his heavy metal flashlight against the driver's side, glass a loud, violent crack that echoed through the empty gas station. "Open this door right now, or I'm breaking the glass and pulling you through it." On the passenger side, Lewis had drawn his weapon, aiming it squarely at Kendrick's chest through the windshield. "Stay calm," Kendrick told himself. Let them hang themselves. Kendrick unlocked the door and pushed it open. Before he could even plant his boots on the concrete, Braddock lunged. The officer grabbed a fistful of Kendrick's hoodie and violently yanked him out of the driver's seat. Kendrick was a solid man, built like a linebacker, but he forced himself to go limp, offering zero physical resistance as Braddock spun him around and slammed his chest onto the hot hood of the sedan. "Stop resisting! Stop resisting!" Braddock screamed for the benefit of his own cruiser's dashcam, violently wrenching Kendrick's left arm behind his back. "I am not resisting," Kendrick said calmly, his cheek pressed flat against the warm metal of his car. "I am completely compliant. You have no probable cause for this stop, and you are violating my civil rights." "Shut your mouth!" Braddock snarled, driving his knee sharply into the back of Kendrick's thigh. The cold steel of handcuffs ratcheted tightly around Kendrick's wrists, biting into his skin. Lewis came around the front of the car, looking slightly panicked. "Check his pockets, Mitch. Check him for weapons." Braddock roughly patted Kendrick down his hands, sliding down to the back pocket. He pulled out the leather wallet. He flipped it open to find the driver's license, but the wallet fell open to the opposite side. Right there, gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights of the gas station canopy, was a solid gold shield. Next to it was an official United States Department of Justice identification card, bearing Kendrick's photo and the stark blue letters, Federal Bureau of Investigation. For a fraction of a second, the swagger evaporated from Braddock's face. He stared at the badge, then up at Kendrick, who had turned his head just enough to look the officer dead in the eye. "You want to read that out loud, Officer Braddock?" Kendrick asked quietly. A smart cop would have frozen uncuffed Kendrick and started apologizing profusely. But Mitchell Braddock was not a smart cop. He was a bully who had operated with absolute impunity for far too long, and his ego immediately overrode his common sense. He couldn't back down in front of Lewis, and he couldn't admit he just assaulted a federal agent. Braddock made a split-second decision that would cost his city $10 million. He snapped the wallet shut and shoved it into his own cargo pocket. "Look at this garbage, Lewis." Braddock laughed a nervous, synthetic sound. "Guy bought a fake FBI badge off the internet, impersonating a federal officer. That's a felony. It's real, and you know it," Kendrick warned, his voice dropping an octave. "You need to think very carefully about your next move." "My next move is taking your lying, impersonating ass to jail," Braddock spat. He grabbed Kendrick by the chain of the handcuffs and dragged him roughly toward the back of the squad car. "Watch your head," he mocked, right before intentionally shoving Kendrick downward, forcing him to awkwardly cram himself into the hard plastic back seat of the cruiser. The door slammed shut, sealing Kendrick in the claustrophobic dark rear of the police car. As the cruiser peeled out of the gas station, tires screeching, Kendrick leaned back against the hard plastic seat. He didn't yell. He didn't demand a lawyer. He just smiled into the darkness. The trap was officially sprung. The ride to the 44th precinct was filled with the obnoxious sounds of Braddock and Lewis congratulating themselves in the front seat. They joked about the fake badge, mocking Kendrick's calm demeanor, mistaking his professional discipline for fear. Through the heavy plexiglass partition, Kendrick simply observed. He memorized their badge numbers, the radio chatter, the specific route they took. He was gathering evidence with every passing second. 12 miles away in a secure, windowless room, deep inside the FBI field office, Special Agent in charge, Rachel Croft, stood with her arms crossed, staring at a massive digital map of Fairmont City. A blinking green dot representing Kendrick's biometric watch was moving rapidly toward the precinct. "Audio is clear." A young technician sitting at a console reported, pulling one of his headphones back. "We have the assault, the unlawful arrest, and the intentional suppression of federal credentials all on tape." They didn't find the wire. Rachel's eyes were cold. Did he sustain any serious injuries? Heart rate spiked during the physical altercation, but it's leveled out to 65 beats per minute. He's calm, Mum. He's letting it play out. Let's get the United States Attorney on the line, Rachel commanded, turning to her deputy. Wake him up if you have to. I want a federal magistrate ready to sign a stack of warrants, and get the tactical operations team out of bed. Full tactical gear. No sirens until they are 1 block away from that precinct. Back in Fairmont City, the cruiser pulled into the gated sally port of the 44th Precinct. It was a brutalist concrete building from the 1970s, completely devoid of windows on the ground floor. It looked less like a police station and more like a decaying fortress. Braddock hauled Kendrick out of the back of the car, dragging him inside to the booking area. The room smelled intensely of stale coffee, industrial floor wax, and sweat. At the elevated front desk sat Sergeant Thomas Calloway, a grizzled, heavy-set man with a deeply lined face who looked like he hadn't cared about the law in 20 years. "What do we have, Braddock?" Calloway grunted, barely looking up from his computer screen. "Got a live one, Sarge." Braddock grinned, shoving Kendrick toward the holding cage. Reckless driving, resisting arrest, assaulting a police officer. Oh, and the cherry on top, he's carrying forged federal credentials. Had a fake FBI badge in his wallet. Calloway stopped typing and finally looked down. He looked at Kendrick's stoic face, then looked at the wallet Braddock tossed onto the high wooden desk. Calloway picked it up, opened it, and stared at the gold shield. He squinted, holding it up to the fluorescent light overhead. He ran his thumb over the intricate, deeply embossed lettering. He tilted the ID card, watching the holographic seal of the Department of Justice shimmer flawlessly in the light. A heavy silence fell over the booking room. Calloway had been on the job for 28 years. He knew what a fake badge looked like. The cheap metal, the glue holding the pin on the back, the laminated cards from a print shop. This was not fake. This was heavy. It was real. "Where did you pull him over, Mitch?" Calloway asked, his voice suddenly sounding very tight. "Miller Avenue," Braddock replied, oblivious to his sergeant's shift in tone. "He was giving us lip, so we brought him in." Calloway looked down at Kendrick, who was standing quietly in his handcuffs, staring right back at him with an unblinking, predatory gaze. "Take his cuffs off and put him in cell 3. Calloway ordered, quietly, swallowing hard. "Don't process him in the system yet. Just put him in the cell." "Sarge, what about his prints?" Lewis asked nervously. "I said put him in the cell," Calloway barked. Braddock forcefully marched Kendrick over to the holding area, unlocked the heavy iron bars of cell 3, and shoved him inside. "Enjoy your stay, fake agent," Braddock sneered as the heavy iron door slammed shut with a deafening metallic clang. Kendrick rubbed his wrists, scanning the small, filthy cell. The concrete floor was sticky, and the single steel bench was bolted to the wall. He wasn't alone. Huddled in the corner was a young boy, maybe 19 years old, nursing a heavily bruised eye and a split lip. Kendrick walked over and sat on the opposite side of the bench. "You all right, son?" he asked quietly. The kid looked up, terrified. "They busted my tail light," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I pulled out my phone to record them, and that big cop, the one with the tattoos, he smashed my phone and hit me in the face with his flashlight. They said if I tell anyone, they'll plant narcotics in my car and send me to prison." Kendrick felt a deep, familiar anger burn in his chest. This was exactly why he took this assignment. This was why he endured the indignity of the arrest. Because for every Kendrick Hayes who could handle himself, there were 100 kids like this one whose lives were ruined in the dark corners of this very building. "What's your name?" Kendrick asked gently. "Toby." The boy sniffled. "Well, Toby, Kendrick said, leaning his head back against the cold concrete wall. "I promise you they aren't going to plant anything in your car. And that cop with the tattoos today is his very last day wearing a badge." Out in the booking area, paranoia was setting in like a fast-acting poison. Sergeant Calloway had taken the wallet into the back office and locked the door. He booted up his personal computer and pulled up a restricted law enforcement database. His hands were shaking slightly as he typed in the name from the ID Kendrick Hayes. The screen loaded for 3 agonizing seconds before flashing a bright red banner. Restricted file. Clearance level 6 required. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Public Corruption Division. Calloway felt the blood drain from his face, leaving his skin a sickly grey. He sat back in his creaking office chair, the air suddenly feeling very thin. They hadn't just arrested a federal agent. They had arrested a federal agent who specialized in taking down corrupt police officers. And they had assaulted him. Panic seized the sergeant. He burst out of his office, his eyes wild. "Braddock Lewis! Get in here right now," he screamed across the precinct floor. Meanwhile, inside, Cell 3, Kendrick checked the time on his biometric watch. It was 1:15 a.m. He walked up to the iron bars gripping the cold steel in his hands and looked out into the chaotic bullpen of the 44th precinct. He could see officers scrambling, whispering furiously to one another as word spread about the ID in the back room. Kendrick took a deep breath and spoke loudly, his voice echoing perfectly off the concrete walls, making sure his hidden microphone caught every word. "Sergeant Calloway!" Kendrick's voice boomed out, freezing the entire room. Every officer turned to look at the man locked in the cage. "By my watch, I've been unlawfully detained for exactly 42 minutes. I want you to listen to me very carefully. You have exactly 3 hours to let me make a phone call and correct this mistake. If you don't—" Kendrick offered a chilling, knowing smile. "This building belongs to the United States government." The silence that followed Agent Kendrick Hayes' ultimatum was suffocating. Every police officer in the booking area stood frozen, staring at the man in Cell 3. Inside his locked office, Sergeant Calloway was hyperventilating. He grabbed his desk phone with trembling, sweaty fingers and dialed a direct, unrecorded line. It rang twice before a gruff voice answered. "This better be important, Tommy. It's 1 a.m, said Captain Richard Donovan, the precinct commander. Donovan was a 20-year veteran, a man with powerful political connections and a legendary reputation for ruling the South District like a mob boss. He was the architect of the 44th Precinct's absolute corruption. "Cap, we have a massive problem," Calloway stammered, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Braddock and Lewis just brought in a guy from Miller Avenue. Black guy driving a grey sedan. Rough stop, tossed him in the cage." "So let him sit and rot," Donovan groaned through the receiver. "Why are you calling me about a routine street sweep?" "Because he's not a civilian, Cap," Calloway whispered, frantically, his eyes darting toward his office door. Braddock pulled his wallet. "The guy has a solid gold shield. I ran the credentials through the Highside database. It's real. He's a federal agent, FBI, Public Corruption Task Force." The line went dead silent. For 10 agonizing seconds, the only sound was the faint static of the phone connection. "Lock down the precinct," Donovan finally ordered, his voice suddenly ice-cold and dangerously calm. "Nobody enters. Nobody leaves. Turn off the exterior security cameras and pull the hard drives from the booking room servers. I will be there in 15 minutes. "Cap, we can't—" "Do exactly as I say, Tommy, or we are all going to federal prison." The line clicked dead. Down in the cell, Kendrick leaned against the wall, listening to the muffled chaos outside the iron bars. He could hear heavy boots running across the linoleum doors, slamming, and the distinct, panicked murmurs of officers realizing their careers were evaporating. Next to him, young Toby was shaking. "Are they going to kill us?" Toby whispered, tears cutting clean lines down his bruised face. "Nobody is dying tonight," Kendrick said firmly, never taking his eyes off the booking desk. "They are panicking, and when corrupt men panic, they make mistakes. Just sit tight." 20 minutes later, the heavy steel security doors of the precinct hissed open, and Captain Richard Donovan strode into the bullpen. He was a tall, imposing man, wearing a tailored suit over a dark turtleneck, completely out of place in the grimy station. He walked straight past the trembling patrolman and into Calloway's office, slamming the door shut. When Donovan emerged 10 minutes later, he didn't look panicked. He looked lethal. He walked directly to cell 3. He stared at Kendrick, analyzing the man who had infiltrated his fortress. "Agent Hayes," Donovan said, his voice smooth and devoid of emotion. "It seems my men made a regrettable administrative error." "An administrative error," Kendrick repeated, walking slowly up to the bars. He looked down at his bruised wrists, still bearing the deep red indentations from the handcuffs. "That's a creative way to describe a felony assault and kidnapping under the color of law, Captain Donovan." Donovan's eyes narrowed. "You know who I am." "I know exactly who you are, Richard," Kendrick replied, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm register. "I know about the protection money you extort from the businesses on Miller Avenue. I know about the narcotics your tactical unit redistributes out of the evidence room. And I know you ordered Braddock to make that stop tonight. You just didn't expect to catch a federal agent in your net." Donovan stepped closer to the bars, completely dropping the facade. "You think you're untouchable because you have a gold badge in your pocket. You're in my house, Hayes. The cameras are off. The servers are wiped. As far as the system is concerned, you were never processed. You don't exist here." "You really think the Bureau sent me in here blind?" Kendrick smiled, tapping the center of his chest. "I'm streaming this entire conversation to a federal command post. You're digging your grave deeper with every word." Donovan's face hardened. He turned to Braddock, who was standing nervously by the desk. "Get him out of the cage and bring him to Interrogation Room B. Now." Braddock unlocked the cell, grabbing Kendrick by the arm, but Kendrick easily shrugged off the officer's grip, walking under his own power toward the interrogation room. Once inside the windowless, soundproof room, Donovan locked the door. He pulled a small black electronic wand from his jacket pocket, a bug sweeper. He waved it over Kendrick's chest, and it immediately shrieked with a high-pitched electronic tone. Donovan smiled a predatory grin. "Take off the hoodie." Kendrick didn't move. Braddock and Lewis drew their batons, stepping forward. Knowing a physical fight in a locked room against 3 armed men was tactical suicide, Kendrick slowly pulled the hoodie over his head. Taped securely to his collarbone was the micro-transmitter. Donovan reached out violently, ripping the tape and the wire off Kendrick's chest. He dropped the transmitter on the floor and crushed it beneath the heel of his Italian leather shoe. The small red light blinked out. "There goes your lifeline, Agent," Donovan sneered. 12 miles away inside the FBI field office, the live audio feed abruptly dissolved into deafening static. "We just lost him," the audio technician shouted furiously, typing on his keyboard. "The signal is completely dead. Biometrics are still transmitting, but audio is gone." Special agent in charge. Rachel Croft felt a cold spike of dread in her stomach. Donovan had found the wire. Kendrick was now completely isolated inside a locked precinct with men who had nothing left to lose. "That's it. Time is up," Croft commanded, turning to the heavily armed tactical commander standing by the door. "Execute the raid. Breach that building and secure my agent. If any Fairmont PD officer reaches for a weapon, you put them down. Go." Back in the interrogation room, Donovan laid out his new reality. Here is what's going to happen. Hayes, Donovan said, pacing around the metal table. In the trunk of my car, I have 2 kilograms of pure uncut fentanyl. Braddock is going to go outside and place it in the trunk of your unmarked sedan. Then we are going to call the local press. We are going to announce that we caught a corrupt federal agent moving narcotics through my city. Kendrick stared at him, absolutely unblinking. It will be your word against mine, my sergeant, and my decorated officers, Donovan continued. The Bureau will disavow you. You'll spend 20 years in a federal penitentiary. Unless what Richard Kendrick asked calmly. Unless you walk out of this precinct right now, get in your car, and never step foot in Fairmont City again. You drop the investigation, we drop the charges, and we both live to see tomorrow. Kendrick leaned forward, resting his hands flat on the metal table. He looked at Donovan, then at Braddock, and finally at Lewis, whose hands were shaking uncontrollably. You think you have leverage, Kendrick said softly, but you fundamentally misunderstand the situation you are in. I didn't come here to negotiate, Captain. I came here to be the bait. Kendrick tapped his wristwatch. It's 4 a.m. I've been in this building for exactly 6 hours. You smashed my microphone, which means my special agent in charge just lost audio contact with me. Do you have any idea what the FBI does when an undercover agent goes dark inside a hostile environment? A low mechanical rumble began to vibrate through the floor of the interrogation room. Outside the 44th precinct, the heavy July fog was suddenly pierced by the blinding beams of high-intensity spotlights. 4 massive armored Bearcat tactical vehicles had jumped the curbs, completely sealing the building's front, rear, and side exits. A heavily mobilized detachment of FBI SWAT operators poured out, moving with terrifying silent precision. Inside the booking room, Sergeant Calloway barely had time to look at the security monitors. He saw a federal agent in heavy body armor slap a block of C4 explosive to the reinforced glass of the main doors. "Capla!" Calloway screamed over the radio, his voice cracking with pure terror. "The feds are here." Boom! The heavy doors blew completely off their hinges, sending a shower of glass and twisted metal flying across the precinct bullpen. Blinding flashes of stun grenades erupted immediately after. "FBI, nobody move, drop your weapons." Dozens of laser sights painted the chests of the stunned, terrified patrolmen. Officers who had acted like untouchable warlords just hours before were now dropping their weapons, falling to their knees, and sobbing as federal agents forcefully zip-tied their wrists. Inside the interrogation room, the sound of the explosion and tactical shouting echoed through the concrete walls. Captain Donovan froze. The color completely drained from his face as his leverage evaporated in a fraction of a second. Kendrick slowly stood up from the metal table, calmly adjusting his shirt. His demeanor was just as controlled as it had been at the gas station 6 hours prior. "Like I said, Richard," Kendrick whispered, staring a hole through the corrupt captain. "This building belongs to the United States government." The interrogation room door was kicked open with shattering force. 4 FBI SWAT operators rushed in, rifles leveled directly at Donovan, Braddock, and Lewis. "Hands in the air, do it now!" the lead operator roared. Mitchell Braddock, the vicious bully who had smashed a teenager's face earlier that night, whimpered as he collapsed to his knees. Captain Donovan raised his hands, his arrogant facade completely shattered, finally realizing his criminal empire was gone. Special Agent Rachel Croft walked into the room, her gold badge hanging prominently over her tactical vest. She looked at the 3 arrested cops, then turned to Kendrick. "You good, Hayes?" she asked. "I'm fine, boss," Kendrick replied. "But we have a witness in cell 3 who needs medical attention, and I believe these gentlemen have an appointment with the United States Attorney." By sunrise, the 44th precinct was a ghost town, completely taken over by federal investigators. The United States Attorney announced the immediate indictment of Donovan Calloway Braddock Lewis and 13 other officers implicated by the raid and the seized hidden files. 17 badges were taken off the streets in a single morning. The systemic corruption led to a massive Department of Justice overhaul of the Fairmont City Police Department. But the final crushing blow came a year later. Kendrick Hayes stood in a federal courtroom watching as young Toby took the stand. With Kendrick's backing, Toby's legal team filed a massive civil rights lawsuit against the city. Terrified of the overwhelming federal evidence, the city didn't even attempt a trial. They settled. Fairmont City was forced to pay out a staggering $10 million in damages, with a massive trust set up to secure Toby's future. Justice absolute and undeniable had finally been served. And that is exactly why you never judge a book by its cover, and why absolute power will always face a reckoning when the right trap is set. What would you have done if you were in Agent Hayes's shoes? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this crazy, real-life story of justice served, make sure to